Well, hey there, WellHouse Church. Pastor Cullen, excited to be back with you for another week of storytelling through the book of Acts. Today I want us to ponder a question together. I want us to ponder the question, what it means to be a person of God. What it means to be a person who belongs to God. You know, some might say this is a question of salvation. That is kind of how I remember thinking of the construct growing up. But if we put this on a more macro level, if we put this in a larger categorical system of theology kind of conversation, what we would find is that in macro theology, we must believe that God is the author of life. That God is the author and sustainer of life. And if that is true, if that fundamental premise is true, that God is the author and sustainer of life and that none of this is just happenstance, if that is the case, then every single individual person who has breath in their lungs belongs to God in some capacity. But not every person who has breath in their lungs lives a life that is revealing of God. Not all of them even live lives that are even remotely conducive to allowing for God. And some people who have breath in their lungs outright reject a God altogether. And so what does that mean for us as people who are in pursuit of divine likeness? What does it mean to be a person of God? I don't know, if I'm being honest, but I think our story today really helps us answer this question. It's the beginning of chapter 18 in the book of Acts, and Paul shows up in Corinth, and he meets these two really important characters named Priscilla and Aquila. It's a married couple. We're going to talk about them next week. But he shows up in Corinth, and he's on his own, and he goes to the temple, or he goes to the synagogue, like he always does, and he starts trying to teach them about Jesus. And they're not having it. They start rejecting him and doing all of their normal things. And Paul gets fed up with them. And at this point, we've seen Paul say this once before, but at this point he says, from now on, I'm going to the Gentiles. He's like, I'm done with you Jews. It's over. You've messed it. Well, when he leaves, he gets real mad. He goes to somebody's house. And the text says, beginning in verse 9, one night the Lord said to Paul in a vision, do not be afraid, but speak and do not be silent. For I am with you, and no one will lay a hand on you to harm you. For there are many in this city who are my people. I don't think that idea of being God's people is related to the salvation of believers. Paul's barely been here. Corinth is a massive city of the ancient world. It's a port city. Massive wealth and trade and all the things that make a great wealthy city in the ancient world. Corinth had them, and then some. This vision, God is clearly trying to comfort Paul in a very uncomfortable situation. He's fearful of being stoned and beaten. He tells us in 2 Corinthians of all these horrifying things that happen to him. He's shipwrecked, he's stoned, he's beaten, he's thrown in prison. Paul is a very real threat to his life here. In a very large city in which the Jews have been hostile to him. And so God comes and says, do not be afraid. Speak and do not be silent. For I am with you, and no one will lay a hand on you to harm you. For there are many in this city who are my people. Many in this city who are my people. Paul took that word as a word of comfort. Because the next verse tells us that he stayed there for 18 months, teaching and being with them, being in and among them. 18 months in a place that was hostile because God told him, there are many of my people here. People who he had not converted. You see, church, what I'm trying to point out to you is two things. The first thing is that I think you're probably doing better than you think you are. You know, if there's one thing that the ambiguity of this text creates for me, it's confidence. That if you are here watching this story, that you are one of God's people. Because you are surely in pursuit of the divine. Now, maybe there are levels to the people of God. I definitely think there are levels to the experience of grace in divine likeness. So maybe there are levels. But what I know with confidence is that people who are in pursuit of divine likeness are the people of God. The other thing that I know with certainty is that I don't think you have to believe a certain way or look a certain way in order to be identified as a person of God. I think this text opens up a world of possibilities for what it means to be the people of God and what it means to look like the people of God. Don't forget, don't miss that he has just had a falling out with the Jews and is telling them, I'm going to the Gentiles. I think all of these people are about to look a whole lot of ways that a lot of really religious people don't want them to look. WellHouse Church. It's the inclusivity of the gospel. You are a person of divinity in pursuit of likeness of divinity. And that should be cherished. That should be celebrated. We shouldn't hide that. And you know what? Sometimes faith doesn't always look the same. It doesn't always look the same to be a person of God in certain contexts. That's also okay. I personally am encouraged as I read this text. It means that there's a whole lot of ways in which God is still in pursuit of and in relationship with us people, his people, their people, the people of God. And so WellHouse Church, the question I want to ask you today is, what does it mean for you to be a person of God?